sort of tech at its heart is really just changing mindsets within the space. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's a mindset shift from being paper-based and human only to being much more sort of augmented by technology. That's what we see. That's what we hear mostly.
Welcome back to the Mastering Complexity podcast, episode 4. Excited to have in studio today Mr. Stephen Wall from the Wealth Mosaic. Stephen, thanks for being here.
You're welcome. And thank you for not saying Stefan, but I get that a lot over here.
The PH, it throws people off.
Yeah. We live in an international world now, right? So
that's the reality. Now, for those of us listeners that aren't necessarily familiar with the Wealth Mosaic, can you just give us a quick breakdown of what you've built and where you guys are going?
So the Wealth Mosaic is at its heart a global vendor directory for the wealth management industry. So we put in one place as many vendors as we can find that we know of as relevant to the industry, whether they're servicing family offices or private banks or many other forms of wealth management around the world. It's principally tech, so wealth tech. I would imagine, as I know of nothing else of its scale, it's the biggest wealth tech knowledge resource around the world. It's not just tech, and the future view is not all about tech, but we are heavily focused on the technology infrastructure around wealth management for the time being. Other entities in the platform would be consultants, analysts, compliance firms, research firms, investment research entities. For vendors, so firms selling products, it's basically a marketing platform, but it's hard. It's there to drive exposure, help firms reach an audience, tell that audience who they are and what they do. And for the audience, it's really a discovery platform. So you want a particular solution, but to a particular need at a particular point in time, the Wealth Mosaic is built as one resource where you can find a hell of a lot of stuff and start to work back to find the stuff that's particularly relevant to you at the time. So that's the heart of it. It's directory first, research-led, wealth management focused, which are very important factors in terms of the state of play of the market and the dynamism around the market, that focus. On top of that, we do a bunch of different things. We do a lot of research, we do a lot of content, we are starting to do events, mostly in partnership with an entity in the UK, a firm we work with quite closely called Owen James. Excuse me. So it's really a directory evolving into a knowledge platform, evolving into a real business resource for vendors and wealth managers in and around wealth.
Now, I'm always interested in the foundation, and yourself, you're from the industry, an analyst background, as I understand.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what spurred you to create this, the Wealth Mosaic?
Some level of boredom. I was writing 50, 60 pages of reports and thinking, I'm not sure anyone is really consuming that sort of stuff anymore. I was seeing a lot of tech arrive in wealth and in financial services in general, which was really digital, focusing on user experience. And I was thinking, I'd quite like to move to the future too and have a little bit of a piece of that. But I think the biggest thing is that I saw wealth as an industry changing. So we have a very, very broad view of what wealth is and what wealth management is, from the everyone on the street to the richest in the world and all the segments along the way. And we saw a huge uptake in the accessibility of technology and we call it built for wealth, but the sort of tech out there that was built for wealth management that wasn't sort of taken from somewhere else and just applied to wealth kind of badly. So we saw an explosion in the vendors out there. We saw a huge number of point solutions and ultimately there wasn't a resource to track that. Analysts didn't do it, consultants didn't do it, wealth managers didn't really know what was out there. And so the Wealth Mosaic was built as a platform to try and help progress that knowledge sharing.
Very good. And now I'm wondering, you talked about the dynamism of the industry, the change. Are there a few points you see interesting changes, interesting developments moving forward that you think will have a big impact on the industry? Or?
Well, for good or bad, I think we're moving into a period where the industry cannot just stay and be what it was before. So whatever you think wealth was before, or wealth management was historically, for the good and the bad of it, it's going to change moving forward. It has very little choice. If you think of the influences around all of us, so we typically look at tech influences, regulatory influences, and consumer influences. I think historically wealth management kind of was inside out. It dictated to the client what the offer was and how it was delivered and who to. That's changing.
More client-driven, more
client-driven. So it's from outside into the organizations. They're being influenced by what's going on in the world. That's particularly true across those three dimensions. The regulatory dimension, they're being told more and more how they do business and why. That's true all over the world. And I think, in fact, one thing I would say is this is true internationally. We look across Asia, North America, and Europe principally. Those three influences are there across each market. The trends, to one degree or another, are there in each of those areas. I think, so the industry's changing, it's more complex, the needs of the clients are changing, how they want to interact with firms is changing, the product offering is changing, the technological infrastructure is changing, so all of these things are making an industry move quicker than it did before, and so it just has to grapple with that on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis. If it doesn't, it's not to say that you always have to change in every single area of your business, but you do have to change more than you did before. So my underriding view on wealth management is that what it will be in 5 years, 10 years time, who the clients are, what they want, how they're serviced, who buy, is not necessarily going to look exactly as it does right now.
Absolutely. Now I'm curious, I mean, you've really done a fantastic job building this entity up, and you're now the premier vendor platform out there. But even still, the state of digital marketing these days, it's a battle for visibility, a battle for relevancy. What do you guys do particularly well, you think, that keeps you at the top and continues this path of growth?
We went digital first straight away, and that's a battle, right? We're a self-funded business, so we've got our own issues to deal with in terms of like pushing ourselves into the market and building a product that the market wants. We're a long way on the journey to having a lot of that in place, but we've still got work to do. We do a lot of things like reports, research, content. We're starting to do events. We're building a sort of as dynamic a possible model that we think that the market needs, but we can't sit still. I don't think anyone can. Whatever we do offline, the key for me is building a digital platform, a marketplace, this directory-led resource that is really useful for both sides of the market. So we have a new platform coming soon, which will try and tackle some of the challenges that we see, that we know we need to do better at, that the market wants us to do. Much more positioning, much more user experience, much more of a layered mechanism why firms can engage in the platform the way they want. Vendors can really position against geographies, thematics, and other topics to really position them in the right place, to be discovered by the right people. And similarly, the users of the platform can really drill down into, well, I'm a certain type of wealth manager in a certain place in the world with a certain requirement. I can really get to what I want quickly. So that digital first mindset is something we started out with, but we didn't necessarily know exactly what we wanted or how to do it. Being in the market for 6 or 7 years now, we've been told a lot where we need to go, and we've listened a lot, which is important. I'm basically a researcher by background, so listening is absolutely where I came from and what we need to do. So it's really building something that is usable for the industry and focused on the market. In terms of vendors, I think they have to learn a lot about what marketing is too, as we have. Content has to be really good. It has to be hitting the right points. It has to listen to what the industry wants. It can't just be, we've got a product that's got AI. Okay, well, what does that mean? So it has to be much more educational, engaging. It has to hit the messages that the market needs to listen to, so the buyers. And it can't be everything for everyone, which I think is a disease that tech has suffered from historically.
Absolutely. And I mean, just jumping into that, if there was one or two pieces of advice you could give vendors or those working on the platform to improve their content or work towards further engagements, is there something you'd like everyone to know?
Listen and learn. We all need to do that. Engage consistently. So don't come in and go. It's easier said than done, of course, as is the first point. And do content in different ways. So don't just continually repeat the same message, the same format. Do this sort of stuff. Do video, go to events, do research, right? So give people a different set of mechanisms through which they can engage with you. But I think the first point is listen and learn, right? We're a big fan of research-led sort of content. So go out into the market and try and understand what's going on and put a perspective on it. Work with us, work with others, whoever it happens to be, but take note of what's happening in the market by actually speaking to them. I think a lot of firms go into their little pod, their labs, they develop a fantastic product, but as soon as it hits the market, then they learn actually what that product is.
You need that two-way communication along the way, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of the events and the conversations we have now, we hear some fantastic stuff and you just think, wow, that is absolutely top-notch, brilliant, sounds great. It hits the clients, I mean, the wealth management organizations, then it starts to run into barriers.
Absolutely. Now I'm curious. So when you founded the Wealth Mosaic, you saw a gap in the market that you wanted to fill, and now you guys are moving into the event space as well. What are you going to do differently there?
Well, first of all, we're not going to do events on our own. So we're working with a professional events organization. I'll give them a good plug. So we work with a firm called Owen in the UK, who are very focused on wealth like we are, but they have a fantastic user base. So they have a really engaged community. It's very nurtured. So we're not going to sort of take on events and do it differently. We're going to work with them and listen to their learnings. What's very different from us is we're not an event company. We have a great platform. We do a lot of content. We do research. We do insights. Events is part of that mix. What we see from the industry is that firms want a mechanism to engage with you how they choose. So whether it's content, research platform, events, we give them that optionality. For vendors, it's a bit of a campaign platform effectively. So you can choose to work with us in a multitude of different ways, digitally or in person, but the things fit together. So an event is not in isolation. It's part of a broader play to service the market and build a community.
Absolutely. And I think speaking of communities, the digital community, the offline community, increasingly relevant. How are you trying to bring these two together? How will the platform work to merge these two communities or keep some consistency?
First of all, the platform is going to be the host of everything, right? So as we move forward, whether we do an event and it's in person, of course, or digitally, it'll be hosted ultimately online. By that, I mean registrations and the content that flows from it. It will integrate into the themes that we have on our site. So if it's about ESG, we've got an ESG theme coming in the site. If it's about the next gen, we've got a next gen theme coming in the site. So that content will sit in there. As I said, we've always wanted to be digital first. That's the way we can reach the world easier. Events is much harder to do that. So we want them all to flow together. Often our events are associated to research or to reports, or they're associated to particular themes. So it's trying to tie them all together. But ultimately, if we do an event or we do a piece of research or we do anything, it's got to fit into our platform. So that platform first model is still key for us.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you guys are active across the world. As you were saying, focus points, North America, Europe, UK, APAC, and MENA becoming increasingly important. And you talked about listening and learning. Is there anything you can say, any interesting feedback about the wealth management space in these different geographies?
They've all got similar challenges. None of them are free of problems, equally opportunities. So I'm still a great believer that wealth in its broadest sense is a fantastic industry to be in. So we're not just talking about high net worth, ultra high net worth family office, if that's the sort of traditional view of what wealth management is. Retail wealth, the next gen, the increasing segmentation of wealth management, the different mechanisms through which people want to be served and accessed, and the way in which they'll engage with the industry. I think it's a dynamic space. Looking at the US, we principally look at the US rather than broader North America. In Europe, it's fairly broad, but mostly sort of UK, Switzerland. And in APAC, it's principally driven out of Singapore. But we have done projects in Southeast Asia and the Middle East and so on and so forth. I think basically the opportunity for all of them is there. The challenges for all of them are there. The opportunities and challenges that they all face are kind of similar. So we can talk about data in every single one of those geographies. We can talk about legacy technology in every one of those geographies. We can talk about a massive marketplace of technology opportunity. We can talk about clients wanting to be served differently. So each of them have their nuances. In the UK now, it's consumer duty. In Switzerland, it's FINIG. In Asia, still things like suitability. So the generic themes are the same. It's just the applications of them that might be different. But I still fall back to the fact that they've all got challenges. We hear it every day, but they've all got fantastic opportunities. I think to summarize, particularly from a tech perspective, where I see wealth going, there's no genius in saying this, it's going to be a technology-enabled industry more so than ever has before. And technology-enabled wealth management is the way in which they reach the clients, they service the clients, they do better business, they future-proof their presence in the market in terms of the wealth management organizations.
Absolutely. And now, as much as things are moving towards a more tech-led focus, I'm still a strong believer that there's a big space for the human connection, the human touch. We like to think with our products of augmenting the abilities of client relationship managers and that kind of thing. What do you say about the client interaction, the need for the human touch moving forward?
It's clear, and it's not just client interaction. So technology on its own is not going to get the industry anywhere. It has to be dropped into the existing environment. It has to work with people, culture, budget, leadership. Pretty much any time we do webinars or have a discussion or we go to an event or we host an event and we're talking about whatever aspect of tech, you never ever get away from the fact that there is a human in that loop who is critical to the successful delivery and application of whatever the tech is. So the hybrid model is absolutely there. Tech will not work in most instances in this industry without a role for the human. It's absolutely clear. So if you just look at, we look at, as an example, I don't know, digital wealth management, robo-advice, whatever you want to call it. Great learnings for the industry, but that, they haven't necessarily stolen clients from the traditional wealth management market. What they've done is taught the industry a different way of doing things, different way of opening up segments and running business, being more efficient potentially. So all of that stuff with a sort of tech at its heart is really just changing mindsets within the space. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's a mindset shift from being paper-based and human only to being much more sort of augmented by technology. That's what we see. That's what we hear mostly.
Absolutely. And now there's a lot of challengers in the space as well. Startups that focus on doing one or two things very well. What's your advice to more legacy providers or banks or wealth managers that are now facing this challenge? How do you think they can remain competitive?
It comes back to what I said earlier about what we do. It's listen and learn and engage. You can't, if you sit there and hunker down, at a certain point in time, it's going to come back and bite you. I don't think, is there anyone in the industry that can ride this out without engaging? No. If you speak to all of the big firms and many others in the industry, they all engage at one level or another, and they all know they have to, because at a certain point the road will run out for them. So it's basically listen, learn and engage and take from it what you will. Speaking to someone this morning, and it's absolutely true, the market is not going to get ripped to pieces straight away, right? It's not. It's regulated, it's difficult. Clients still have certain expectations about how things are done, and they're not necessarily always convinced with new tech. And often, as I saw this morning, the digital replacement of a human mechanism, this has nothing to do with wealth, didn't work, right? So there's still a journey to go on. For me, I fall back on listen, learn and engage, because it is there, and ultimately it's about doing better business, right? It's not about threat necessarily, it's about enablement, being more efficient, reaching more clients, keeping them happier, and doing it with tech at the heart of the business model.
Absolutely. Now, looking ahead, we talked about a couple different trends, and also thinking about things like a further push towards sustainability or financial inclusion. Are there any trends that you see that are troubling in your perspective?
Yeah, there's crypto in wealth. I'm not necessarily convinced that that's a good thing. It is at a certain level if you can tolerate the risk and the loss. For everyone else, who doesn't have that capacities for loss, I'm not entirely sure some of the products that are kind of in the market and being pushed, democratized. Yeah, private markets, great in principle, but I was always taught that private markets was for those who could really tolerate it. So it's being democratized. Is that really a good thing? I'm not entirely sure. I think wealth has a responsibility. Wealth management has a responsibility to its end clients. The regulator's pushing for that. So I think I see an industry that has huge opportunity for growth, for improvement. And I don't mean that critically. It's just that you can always do better business. I think technology is absolutely the heart of that. I think some of the products that are available to the client needs to be really looked at seriously. I think there is a role for the regulator to help the industry build a better business and cut out some of the elements that aren't so good. So it's not things like ESG and all of these things. Yeah, great. I just think in general, the client-centric approach actually needs to be there, not a product-centric approach. And some of the products I do look at and think, I'm not entirely sure.
Absolutely.
Not within wealth, maybe in a little streamlined bit on the side.
Sure. Now, you mentioned regulators, and with your experience and exposure in all these different jurisdictions, are there certain places that are better than others, more reactive? Are there regulators listening and learning as well? Are they embedded in the industry themselves? What sort of things have you been learning there?
So we're not too close to this. So it's really what we see. We don't go and speak to regulators necessarily because we're not a regulated entity and we're not building necessarily a product that needs to have any regulatory element to it. We see advanced regulation. I think I could be wrong, and people might tell me I'm completely wrong if I say this, but I think Singapore, UK, US, the markets that I often get they're sort of gold plated. Right? They're the standard bearers. They're leading change. They're the ones I hear of. But again, I'm not necessarily the closest to it to fully judge fairly if that's true or not.
Understood. If we could pivot back then, I'm really interested to hear a little bit about your experience in founding this company and launching it. Were there any challenges along the way? If you had to do it again, what would you do differently?
So I would do it all. I mean, I'd absolutely do it again. There's challenges every day. In building a digital product, we didn't come from a digital background. We just knew that was the direction we wanted to go in. So we've had learnings every day. We absolutely probably make mistakes every day. The one thing that's never changed is the opportunity and the need for the sort of thing that we're doing. So not to say that it should just be us, others in the market trying to make sense of what's going on, be more democratic about access to knowledge and sharing information, building a resource for the industry. I think these things are absolutely true. So the opportunity is still there. We can do better. We learn every day, and I look forward to our new platform being out the door and making us better. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And now with the new platform on the way, it would make sense that you're growing as a company as well. Now on the marketing side of things, are there certain arenas, certain media types that you're really going to lean into moving forward?
Well, I mean, we've done really well because from a sort of general marketing perspective, just by hosting what we host, by building what we build, it gives us great SEO. We haven't spent a penny on SEO. We will moving forward because we can see we can do better. So we will spend money on digital marketing. We will work more with partners. We will work more with the industry than we have done. So we've done a lot for vendors, but that's one part of it. As we've built this thing out, we want to work with, you mentioned regulators. We want to work with regulators. We want to work with industry associations. We want to work with a multitude of wealth managers that we haven't worked for before. So really building kind of collective resource. So very content driven, very knowledge driven, and marketing and any other tools and tactics will just be wrapped around that. Right. So it's very much quality content, a really good platform to host all that stuff, and then work with some good partners, and then apply some tactics on top to help amplify the message for us, for you, for others in the space.
Absolutely. And now with the pivot, with the new website, are you focusing at all on knowledge creation? Less vendor presentation, more nuts and bolts?
Yeah, so my background is research. I kind of steered clear of it, first of all, because there were just too many other things to do. We get approached more now about doing research, and research to drive content, to drive knowledge, to drive engagement is absolutely a good model. So I would, for us, for anyone else sort of looking at growing presence in the market, I would say go the research route and then layer on the content and other elements to get that embedded in the market. It comes back to my point earlier, listen, learn and engage, right? Research is a fantastic method. So we plan to, through events, through reports, through content, to really drive more primary research, to be out in the market, trying to understand what's going on. So one thing that's coming soon from us is a vendor networking club. It's not just to get together and chat. If you bring vendors together, they've got common problems, they've got common opportunities, they want to work together. The industry needs them to work together. So that's one element of a sort of niche tactical play that we will bring to market soon, which should have benefit for a multitude of different firms and will drive knowledge that we can share in the market.
Absolutely. Now, these days, we're spoiled for choice with opportunities for different platforms and different networks. Are we going to see a Wealth Mosaic TikTok channel anytime soon?
I'm not quite sure Wealth is ready for that. We do plan Instagram. In fact, we've planned it for quite a while. We know firms use Instagram. So TikTok, I'm not sure about. I know, I've never been on TikTok, right? I've got a lot of other things to do, and that's not been a priority. But we're open, and we've always been open to whatever channel would work for the industry. We don't close ourselves off to anything. I have perceptions about some of these things and whether they're right or wrong, but if someone tells me we're wrong, then we listen and we'd do it. I hear that people get financial advice on TikTok now, which is a bit of a...
Mostly crypto, I think.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, not necessarily one that I would suggest people follow, but if we see it as an opportunity, we'd have a go at that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just another option for getting closer to the end clients at the time of, where they are and the types of content that they're generally ready to consume.
Yeah, and I think that we don't own the world, right? We don't know everything. I mean, the whole point of building this is to try and build a community where knowledge is shared, right? And if someone comes in with a great idea, I think people should listen. So if it's TikTok, if it's Instagram, if it's Medium, if it's X now, if it is whatever, absolutely, let's do it.
Absolutely. Hey, Stephen, thanks so much for being here today. Really appreciate your time, and I hope to catch up next time you're in Zurich.
Hey, you're welcome. I'll be here again soon.
Perfect.